Hey friends, glad you could make it. Tonight's story starts with some porridge that refuses to move and a piece of bread that could probably stop a door. Just picture it. You're sitting at this rough wooden table, surrounded by people who are chewing like their lives depend on it. The woman who cooked it all is smiling proudly, while you're just trying to figure out if chewing this much counts as some kind of punishment. Across the room, you see someone dipping their bread into their bowl like it's a science experiment, and that's when it hits you. This isn't breakfast. This is survival training. You manage to swallow. A crack runs up the wall, and a goat in the corner just nods like it's seen this all before. But before we get too deep into it, if you're enjoying this little corner of quiet stories, go ahead and give that like button a tap and maybe subscribe. It really does help a small channel like mine find its way through the noise. And feel free to drop a comment saying where you're listening from and what time it is. It's always a strange comfort knowing who's out there, drifting off with us from all around the world. All right, now get comfortable. Let the day just melt away, and let's drift back together into the quiet corners of the past. The first thing you notice is the itch. It starts somewhere in the neighborhood of your left knee and then spreads like a nasty rumor. The second thing you notice is the smell. It's this rich, aromatic blend of sweat, old straw, damp wood, and something that might have been cheese once, but now it feels like it's achieved some higher, angrier state of being. Your mouth tastes like somebody else's bad dream, probably a dream that involved turnips. You try to sit up and immediately find out the ceiling is a lot lower than you thought, as your forehead makes intimate contact with a beam that's seen empires rise and fall. Dust sifts down like it's a shame to even be a part of this moment. You blink once, then twice. The room doesn't get any better. The walls are slanted, and a little slatted window lets in just enough light to pass judgment on you. There's a rickety stool with a crack so wide it's probably developed its own political system. Your bed isn't so much a bed as it is a rude pile of straw that's being held together by hope and maybe some goat hair. And it's entirely possible the goat is still in here somewhere. Something warm shifts near your ankle. You lift the blanket, which is more of a suggestion of a fabric than an actual blanket, and you find a rat curled up in your sock like it pays rent. It just blinks at you with the sheer audacity of someone who knows they've been here longer. You whisper no and shake your foot. It doesn't leave. It just climbs up your leg instead. Outside, someone is yelling. It's not clear who they're yelling at or why, but their voice has the distinct tone of someone who deeply mistrusts the sky. The sun is coming up in that aggressive, unapologetic way that only medieval suns seem to know how. It's bright, it's smug, like a celestial tax auditor. The rooster, surprisingly, is silent. He's possibly too traumatized to participate today, or maybe he's finally unionized. You try to stand up, and your knee makes a sound like a small branch just giving up on life. You're wearing what passes for sleepwear, which is a long shirt that might have been white once, but is now the color of old tea and a series of bad decisions. Your feet hit the floorboards and they creak under your weight in a way that suggests they were not consulted about this first. Every step you take kicks up a fresh note of mildew, as if the room itself is sighing at your life choices. You shuffle over to the window and push it open. The hinges groan like they remember better tenants. Outside, the village is stretching its limbs in various states of discomfort. A cow is wandering diagonally. A pig sneezes and knocks over a bucket. A child is licking a fence post and is told to stop, though nobody sounds very optimistic that he actually will. Two women near a well are already arguing, possibly about goats, possibly about theology. It's honestly hard to tell. You glance back at your room, hoping that maybe it's gotten better in the last 10 seconds. It hasn't. If anything, the rat looks even more comfortable now. Your clothes are draped over a chair that really shouldn't be bearing any weight at all. The tunic is stiff, the hose are uneven, and your one boot definitely has something living in it. You shake it out, something scurries away, you decide it's better not to follow it. There's no mirror, but if there were, it would probably just weep. Your hair is doing a thing, but it's not the same thing all over. One side has decided to embrace the wind, while the other side is just flat with despair. You splash some water on your face from a chipped bowl and immediately regret it. It's colder than most crimes. You sniff. You really hope that smell was just the water. Downstairs, someone is burning something and swearing about it like it's a personal attack. A woman yells your name, or something that sounds close enough, and demands that you bring the pail. You don't know where the pail is. You don't even know what the pail is, but your feet are already moving, because in this time period, hesitation is the close cousin of being shouted at again. You trip on the last stair and land face first in a basket of laundry that smells like it gave up halfway through the drying process. Someone claps, possibly ironically. You rise, your dignity in absolute shreds, your hair now adorned with a sock that isn't yours. The day has officially begun. The air tastes of soot, cabbage, and judgment. And somewhere deep down your spine quietly whispers, "This was a mistake." You awaken with a mouth that feels like it's been lined with burlap and a series of confessions. It tastes like last week's bread and a distant, haunting memory of onions. Your tongue feels furry, your teeth feel suspicious of each other, and your breath could legally qualify as a public warning. Instinctively, you reach for a toothbrush. There isn't one. Of course there isn't. Instead, on a rickety little shelf beside a jug of water and a crust of what might have once aspired to be soap, you find a twig. Just a twig. It doesn't even look hygienic. It looks like something a squirrel gave up on halfway through a project. You stare at it. It stares back. There's a faint smear of something on the end. Maybe it's someone else's attempt at cleanliness. Maybe it's tree sap. Maybe it's death itself. Nearby, a small clay dish holds a pile of ashes that smell faintly of goat and charcoal, and despair. You poke it. It puffs up slightly like it's insulted by your hesitation. There is also moss, not on purpose, just clinging to the wall like it's renting the space and has no plans of leaving. You think maybe this is all a mistake, but the taste in your mouth insists that you do something, anything, before the entire village collectively decides that you are cursed. You venture outside, searching for a solution. The morning air is damp, thick with smoke and a sense of distant judgment. A woman is hunched over a bucket near the well, her sleeves rolled up, her mouth wide open, and her hands are deep in what appears to be a bundle of greenery. She is vigorously scrubbing her gums with a wad of moss, muttering something that sounds vaguely religious but also mildly accusatory. Her eyes meet yours for just a moment. She nods once, like a priest granting absolution through shared discomfort. You gather the courage to copy her. You pick a patch of moss from the stone wall and dip it in the water bucket that may or may not have been recently visited by a toad. It drips mournfully in your hand. You squint at it, raise it to your lips and begin. It is immediately so much worse than you imagined. It tastes like wet wood and a crushed apology. You gag, but you persist. The moss disintegrates slightly and then something crunchy happens, which you really hope was just a twig and not an insect that had life goals. You rinse with the water. It tastes like old iron and disappointment. A man nearby sneezes so hard he drops his pail and mutters something about demons in the wind. Determined, you move on to the next phase. You retrieve the twig. You've seen people chewing on them in old paintings. You just didn't realize those paintings were depictions of personal tragedy. You bite down and begin to scrape. The twig does not clean your teeth. It exfoliates your soul. It splits. You spit out tiny splinters. You try to use the ashes next. You dip the twig, now reduced to a slightly damp stick of failure, into the pile of soot and scrub again. Now your mouth tastes like a burnt fence and betrayal. The ashes coat your teeth in a way that makes your gums ache, just in anticipation. A small child walks by, takes one look at you and runs away screaming something about ghosts. A dog sniffs you and immediately changes its mind. You miss mint with a desperate, soul-crushing longing. You miss the quiet fizz of toothpaste tubes. You miss the tiny bristles of a brush that didn't come from a tree you had to personally negotiate with. You miss mouthwash and fluoride and dental floss and the unspoken agreement that certain parts of your mouth should never, ever feel crunchy. The woman with the moss is now gargling something that smells like vinegar and boiled bark. She offers you a handful. You shake your head. She shrugs, spits into the grass, and walks away like a warrior who's just finished a duel. Your teeth feel raw. Your tongue feels like it's been dragged across gravel. Your lips are dry. Your breath is somehow worse. And you're starting to think the real hygiene in this era is just not opening your mouth at all. You give up. You rinse one final time. You swish the iron-tinted water around like you're swearing allegiance to a lifetime of poor choices, and then you spit. It lands near your foot with a sullen splat. You wipe your mouth with a sleeve that is technically fabric. A man walks past, sniffs, pauses, and then nods with mild approval. "You'll live," he says. It doesn't feel like a compliment. You ask where the bathroom is with the polite desperation of someone who is actively trying not to panic. A woman stirring something untrustworthy in a pot gives you a look that is usually reserved for liars and visiting nobles. Another man, barefoot and proudly unaware of the concept of soap, chuckles so hard he spits into the fire. A child giggles and runs away, clutching a turnip like it knows exactly what you're about to find out. Finally, an elderly woman with a shawl the colour of bad choices jabs a crooked finger toward the edge of the field and mutters, "That way, mind the geese." Then she hands you a square of wool with a texture that feels personally offensive. There is no follow-up, no further explanation, just the wool, the warning, and a sense of impending doom that's clinging to your boots. You walk slowly at first, then you start to walk faster because nature is no longer asking politely. The path turns to mud. The mud then turns to something a bit more philosophical. You pass a fence that has clearly given up on life and a tree that seems to be judging you with its bark alone. Finally, you see it. A ditch. There is no structure, no door, no privacy. Just a shallow groove in the earth lined with wilted grass and broken dignity. A stick is leaning nearby, possibly as a marker, or possibly in case you lose the will to go on. The wool is in your hand. You hate it more than anything you have ever known. It has the softness of sandpaper and the emotional warmth of a debt collector. You look around. There is, of course, no toilet paper, no seat, no plumbing. There is, however, a goose. It stands just a few feet away, as still as a statue and twice as judgmental. Its eyes are small and round and full of a complicated backstory. It honks once, not loudly, but with the quiet menace of someone who has absolutely nothing left to lose. You inch toward the ditch, trying to act casual, like you belong here, like you were born for this very moment. The goose steps closer. You step faster. You crouch, trying to find a position that doesn't compromise every last shred of dignity you have left. There is no such position. The ditch smells like historical trauma and a series of fermented decisions. You make a noise that might have been a prayer. The goose does not move, it just watches. You are not sure if it is judging you or just waiting for you to make a mistake. You suspect it's both. Somewhere nearby, a twig snaps, a dog barks. The wind changes direction in a way that feels particularly ominous. You try to move quickly. You fumble the wool. It falls into the ditch like a martyr. You freeze. The goose takes another step closer, flaps its wings once, and emits a low, unsettling sound like a bagpipe remembering a war. You grab a leaf. It is the wrong leaf. There is no right leaf. You shuffle back from the ditch, half crouched, half haunted, and swear softly into your sleeve. You do not make eye contact with the goose. The goose does not break its stare. You suspect it has already written about you in its diary. You do not want to read what it says. By the time you return to the village, you have walked slower than usual, and you've thought about every single choice that led you to this moment. Your boots are damp in ways that boots should never be damp. The wool square is gone, lost to the ages, or perhaps claimed by the earth as some kind of payment. No one asks how it went. No one has to. They can just tell. A child points. A woman crosses herself. The man with no shoes just laughs again, harder this time. You say nothing. You just sit on a wooden stool that does not forgive and stare at a wall that doesn't blink. And from across the field, faint but unmistakable, the goose honks. Once. With meaning. You are handed a bowl of something that calls itself porridge, but it looks like it was created in a backroom deal between a swamp and a glue factory. It doesn't slosh. It doesn't move. It just holds its shape like it's proud of its own density. A spoon is already sticking straight out of it, though it's unclear if that's because someone left it there or because the spoon itself just couldn't escape. Steam curls from the top, the kind of steam that suggests a warning rather than warmth. You stare at it long enough to wonder if it's watching you back. The woman who made it beams at you with the confidence of someone who hasn't actually tasted it in years. "Hardy," she says, as though that's an answer to several questions you haven't even asked yet. You just nod because manners are still a thing, even if flavor apparently isn't. A man beside you is already shoveling it into his mouth with the kind of enthusiasm of someone who is either truly hungry or completely numb. You take a spoonful and lift it with great care. It stretches slightly, then it snaps. The smell is vaguely familiar, something between boiled socks and punishment. You taste it. Immediately your soul flinches. It is warm, but not in a comforting way. It's more in the way of being soothed by a radiator. The texture is grainy, yet somehow slimy at the same time. It clings to your teeth like it's trying to become a permanent part of your dental plan. There's no sugar, no fruit, not even a whisper of seasoning. It is pure, elemental blandness, like someone described oats to a ghost and then dared it to cook. Your tongue recoils. Your throat begins to negotiate and your stomach signs a waiver. You swallow mostly because you are being watched. The bread arrives next. A round, solid lump that has the exact shape and emotional weight of a riverstone. You tap it lightly on the table. The table actually winces. You take a bite, or rather you attempt one. The crust doesn't really yield so much as it resists. You chew, and then you just stop chewing because absolutely nothing is happening. You get the sense that this loaf of bread might outlive you. Someone across the table dips theirs into the porridge and then gnaws on it thoughtfully, like a goat with tenure. There is no butter, no jam, no joy, just bread, porridge, and the quiet, sinking knowledge that this will not be the worst part of your day. You glance around. Everyone else seems to accept this fate. They chew with the dull resignation of people who know it's either this or a cold turnip later. A boy dips a finger into his bowl, lifts it to the light, and watches it drip back in slow motion like a scene from a culinary horror film. No one stops him. You look down at your own bowl and seriously consider escape. You could fake a choking fit. You could claim you're fasting for spiritual reasons. You could just throw it out the window and blame the goose. But before you can act, an old man beside you says, "Finish it," builds character. You look into his eyes and you see the haunted glimmer of someone who's been built entirely out of character and porridge. You take another bite. It goes down with the enthusiasm of a stone skipping across a lake of regret. The spoon trembles in your hand. You glance at the bread again, you lift it, and on a whim, you hurl it at the wall. There is a dull thud, a dent appears in the wood. The bread remains completely intact. The woman gasps. The wall has lost. No one speaks. The fire just crackles. A baby begins to cry softly, perhaps sensing that something terrible has just occurred. You apologize under your breath and try to eat quietly, which is difficult because every bite sounds like gravel in a barrel. A dog under the table sniffs your bowl and then just walks away. You finish eventually, not because you're full, but because the bowl is finally empty and your will to argue has completely dissolved into the mush. Your jaw aches, your palate is confused, and your stomach makes a sound like a question mark. You place the spoon down gently, unsure if it deserves your thanks or professional therapy. Breakfast is over. You are not stronger, but you are definitely changed. You get dressed because it's expected of you, not because anything about this process feels right. Your clothes are handed over in a lumpy pile with the energy of a warning. The tunic, at first glance, appears to be made of cloth, but upon closer inspection it's actually woven from the very concept of discomfort. It's stiff in some places and limp in others, and it carries the faint smell of a stranger's uncle who once wrestled a badger and lost. You lift it to your face and immediately regret breathing through your nose. The undergarments are somehow worse. They're less of a garment and more of a vague suggestion. A loose, scratchy thing that seems specifically engineered to find parts of your anatomy you've never had a reason to be aware of before, and then introduce them to chafing. The moment it touches your skin, your body begins filing a series of formal complaints. You put it on anyway, because what else are you going to do? Return it? The woman who handed it to you also handed you a wooden spoon and a look that said she'd fought off bandits and once bit a wolf. You are not returning anything. Then come the hose, which are not really hose, so much as long tubes of itchy optimism held up by a mysterious network of ties and pure fear. You attempt to wrap them around your legs like you've seen in the old woodcuts, only to discover that you are not a woodcut man. You are a soft, confused modern person in a time where pants are apparently optional, but judgment is definitely not. Eventually, you succeed in creating a kind of leg cocoon situation. It's not dignified, but it is attached, and that seems to be what passes for fashion here. The tunic goes over your head with all the grace of a burlap sack staging a coup. You emerge, gasping and tangled. There is no stretch to the fabric. There is only resistance. You force your arms through and discover that the seams are not aligned with any known laws of physics or comfort. One sleeve is slightly tighter than the other. The neck hole scratches like it holds a personal grudge against you, and the entire garment sits on your shoulders like you owe it money. Then come the shoes. They are wooden. Not like clogs, not like some kind of fashion statement, just wood. They are boxy, heavy, clunky abominations carved out of pure regret and nailed together with the craftsmanship of a man who clearly hated feet. You try to slip one on and immediately question your commitment to ever walking again. There is no cushioning, no give, just the distinct awareness that your toes are now being held hostage. Every step feels like walking across a floor made of loose stones and bad decisions. They clack loudly like a haunted house on a windy night. You take 3 steps and immediately develop a limp. No one seems surprised. You check yourself in the reflection of a basin filled with water and a faint sense of disappointment. You look like you've just wandered out of a time travel accident and been forced into manual labor before you could even finish your sentence. Your hair is still doing whatever it wants. Your tunic hangs like a sad curtain, and your shoes add 3 inches to your height, but subtract all of your dignity. And still you itch. It starts in one place, somewhere innocuous like your shoulder blade, but then it spreads down your spine, around your ribs, behind your knees, and even somehow under your fingernails. The fabric is touching you in places it has no business reaching. You scratch once, then again, then more furiously, until you resemble a bear trying to shed its winter coat. Someone walks by and snorts. City folk, they mutter as though that explains absolutely everything. You try to hold your head high, but the tunic has somehow shrunk, and your wooden shoes keep catching on unseen ridges in the dirt. You shuffle forward, vaguely upright, all motion and absolutely no confidence. This is what you're wearing now. This is your life. You are dressed for the part, and the part is discomfort, layered in linen and shame. You feel like a scarecrow's less successful cousin. And the worst part is, you're told this is your good outfit. You try to smile at someone, just a simple, modern, friendly smile, the kind of smile you might give a cashier, or a neighbor, or a dog with good posture. But here, in the damp courtyard of a village that looks like it was built by accident and then immediately regretted, that smile lands like a thrown shoe. The man you aim it at freezes mid-spit. His eyes narrow. He actually steps back, like you've just announced a fondness for eating frogs whole. You raise your hand in a half-wave, the international gesture for "I'm harmless," but it's interpreted here as either a threat or some kind of summoning ritual. The man scurries off, muttering something that sounds a lot like plague-faced. You keep walking, determined not to let one weird interaction define your morning. You nod at a woman carrying a basket. She tightens her grip on it, as though you might try to steal her turnips with your mind. You compliment someone's cow. He looks at you like the cow is his wife. A child stares at you from behind a hay cart. You smile at him too, a little wider this time, trying to project warmth, humanity, and approachability. He does not smile back. He produces a turnip from somewhere, possibly an infinite turnip pocket, and hurls it with the precision of a boy who has trained for this very moment his entire life. It hits you right in the knee. It's not a large turnip, but it is emotionally devastating. You yelp, and he laughs. 2 other children join him like small agents of chaos drawn by the scent of a stranger's failure. You try to speak, to explain, to say you're just trying to blend in, make friends, and survive the day without being accused of sorcery. But the words don't come out right. They just tumble into the thick air like foreign coins in a local well. An old woman appears, her shawl billowing slightly in the breeze, like it's caught between 2 worlds. She looks at you, squints, and spits over her shoulder. Not casually, but deliberately, like punctuation. Then she mutters something to the sky as if she's filing a report with forces greater than herself. You don't catch the exact words, but you're fairly sure the general tone was an ominous forecast. You begin to walk faster. Every face you pass is either suspicious or openly disgusted. You hear the word hexed thrown around more than once. A man leans on a pitchfork and just refuses to blink. You smile at a dog. It growls. You try not to take that personally, but it's difficult when even the animals can sense that something is off. You adjust your tunic. It rides up. You pull it down. It rides back up again. There is no dignity here, only friction and the lingering suspicion that everyone knows something you don't. A group of women weaving baskets pause as you walk past. One of them crosses herself. Another whispers into the ear of the third, who gasps as though you've just walked by holding hands with death himself. You glance behind you, just in case. There's nothing there, just dust and shame. You start noticing the shawls now. They're everywhere. Each one is a different colour, but somehow they all convey the same quiet menace. They're worn by the elders, the mothers, the women with strange herbal knowledge and louder than average chickens. They seem to communicate with their eyes, or their knitting needles, or some ancient telepathic system of judgment. You try to look uninteresting. That fails immediately. You trip on your wooden shoe, you flail, and you catch yourself on a barrel full of onions. The onions spill. The shawled women gasp in unison like a choir of disappointment. You bow your head and mumble something about needing water. No one believes you. They think you're hiding something. They think you've seen things, communed with something, disrespected some sacred boundary of a fence or a goose or the fog. A man offers you a side-eye that could pickle vegetables. You give up and just shuffle away, your shoulders hunched, eyes low, with paranoia blooming like mold in a damp pantry. You don't know who you offended or how, but the message is loud and clear. You are not welcome. You are not trusted. And if a shawl ever makes its way onto your shoulders, it will not be for warmth. It will be for a trial. You decide it's time to contribute, to prove your worth, to show these villagers you're not just some strange-smelling interloper with bad shoes and suspicious vibes. You raise your hand, tentatively, heroically, and announce that you'd like to help. Heads turn, a few snorts are stifled. One man immediately just walks away, but someone, a stout woman with arms like baked bread and eyes that have seen the plague, she just nods and says, "Fine, start with the rake." The rake is older than some of the buildings. It has fewer teeth than is ideal, most of them worn down to nubs or just outright missing, and its handle feels like it's already halfway to becoming splinters. You hold it carefully, trying to radiate competence. You are told to rake hay. You nod, as if you have any idea how to rake anything that isn't leaves off a suburban sidewalk. Your first pull is way too hard. The rake lodges itself in a lump of packed straw and then snaps backward with the speed and grace of a catapult. You fall, not in a dramatic way, but in that slow, tragic kind of way where your knees just bend and your soul gives up before gravity even finishes the job. The rake handle breaks in half. The straw somehow looks better than it did before, which feels like a personal insult. Someone watching just sighs. Someone else mutters something about city fingers. You don't know what that means, but you feel judged on a molecular level. You offer to fix the rake. They tell you no. They tell you to get water instead. You feel oddly relieved. Water sounds manageable, familiar. You've encountered it before. They hand you a wooden bucket that feels much heavier than it looks, and you trudge toward the well with the grim resolve of a person who's just remembered that wells have no safety standards. The stone edge rises up before you like an ancient warning. There's a rope and a pulley and a crank that groans the moment you touch it, like even it doubts your intentions. You start lowering the bucket. It drops way too fast. You panic and yank on the rope, which causes the bucket to swing wildly and bounce against the side of the well, making a sound like metal trying to quit its job. Somehow you retrieve it with a couple of inches of murky water and the confidence of a man who's never really succeeded at anything. You lean forward to inspect it, maybe to pour it into another bucket, maybe just to admire it. You're not sure anymore. And that's when your foot slips. Just a little, but enough to tilt your center of gravity, enough to remind you that balance is not a medieval priority. You fall in. It's not a graceful fall. You don't plunge, you clatter, you scrape down the side, knees banging, your tunic catching on something sharp. and you land not with a splash, but with a kind of full-body insult to the very concept of depth. The water is freezing. The bottom is slime. There is no dignity left in this world. Up above, a head appears silhouetted against the light. "Not again," they mutter, which raises several questions, none of which you are emotionally prepared to explore right now. You yell, you sputter, you think about diseases. Hands eventually haul you out, soaking wet, shivering, and covered in things you can't quite identify. You smell like mildew and failure. Your wooden shoes are gone, claimed by the ancient aquatic spirits of bad decisions. Your tunic clings to you in all the wrong places. No one offers you a towel. You try to laugh it off. A weak little chuckle escapes you like steam from a cracked pot. No one laughs back. They just hand you a new task. "Stir the barley mash," they say. You eye the rake handle, still lying broken in the straw, and wonder how quickly things will go wrong this time. You decide to reset your reputation with something low risk. Chores, you think. Good, solid, salt-of-the-earth chores, the kind of thing anyone can do with a little bit of effort and a positive attitude. You announce your intent like a knight volunteering for a quest. Except instead of dragons, you're about to face laundry. There is no cheering. There is only the woman in charge of washing who squints at you like she's evaluating whether your soul is clean enough to be near her linens. She hands you a shirt. It's not white. You're not sure it ever was. It's stiff in some parts and alarmingly soft in others. She points to a bucket of grey water that may have started its life as river runoff, but has since gone on a significant character development arc. There is no soap, only a hard stone, and what you have to assume is faith. You dunk the shirt, swirl it around, and immediately lose all feeling in your hands. The water is glacial. Your fingers turn a noble shade of corpse. You begin scrubbing. The shirt resists, the grime fights back, the fabric tries to fold itself in protest. You keep at it. By the time you finish just one sleeve, your knuckles are scraped raw, your nails are bent into new and interesting shapes, and your forearms are shaking like a leaf that owes someone money. You look up, triumphant and completely soaked. The woman just frowns and says, "That was the rag we use for the pig's foot." You do not cry. You are stronger than that now. Slightly mouldier, but stronger. Farming seems like the next best thing. Dirt you can handle, you're mostly made of it at this point anyway. A man hands you a hoe and gestures toward a patch of field that looks suspiciously like a former battlefield. You nod, you adopt a wide stance, and you begin hacking at the soil with what you hope is rustic charm. The hoe disagrees. 2 swings in, the handle cracks. On the 3rd swing, the metal head snaps clean off and goes flying into the air, disappearing somewhere into a hedge with a sound like a warning from nature itself. The man just stares. You hand him back the handle and say nothing. He says, "We'll find you something else." Which brings you to the cow. You approach the animal with the naive optimism of someone who has only ever seen cows on cheese packaging. She watches you with eyes that suggest she's about to do something legally questionable. You sit down beside her tentatively, you grab the bucket, and you reach toward the udder like someone trying to defuse a bomb. She shifts. You pause. She flicks her tail. You flinch. You begin the milking motion you vaguely remember from a documentary you watched once while you were half asleep. Nothing happens. You try again. She makes a sound that is somewhere between a snort and a final warning. You try a 3rd time, and that's when her leg moves. The bucket is kicked. Milk goes flying. You fall backward, clutching your arm. The cow looks deeply satisfied. You swear you can see her smirk. Someone claps sarcastically from a distance. You no longer care who it is. You are told gently but firmly that perhaps chores are not your gift. Perhaps you are better suited to quieter things. Sitting, maybe. Just sitting in the shade, not near anything sharp or alive or valuable. You nod. Sitting sounds safe. You sit. You fall off the stool. You try again. You sit and the stool tips over. You flail, you catch a nearby basket, and you fall right into it. Eggs crack. The hen screams. Somewhere, a baby begins to cry, even though you're fairly certain there was no baby here 5 minutes ago. You extricate yourself from the mess and decide to sit on the ground instead, arms around your knees, quietly absorbing failure like it's a warm bath. A man walks by, glances at you and says, "That's probably for the best." You watch the village move around you. You breathe in the rich scent of manure and cooked barley. You think maybe tomorrow you'll try something easier like sword fighting. You eat the turnip because it's there, and all the alternatives seem to involve things with more legs than you're comfortable acknowledging. It's not cooked. It's not even particularly clean. It crunches with the texture of something that once dreamed of being edible but was talked out of it by a cruel upbringing and poor soil. It tastes like the earth, not in a wholesome, grounded kind of way, but in a literal, there is dirt in your teeth, possibly still growing kind of way. There's a bitterness to it that suggests it knows all your secrets and it doesn't approve of them. You chew because you must. You swallow because pride won't let you spit it out in front of a crowd that already believes you're cursed. A man with 3 teeth and no eyebrows nods at you like you've just passed some kind of important test. You are not comforted by this. Next, you are handed cheese. It's beige, it's waxy, and it's sweating, which raises several questions you are not equipped to answer right now. You bite into it carefully, hoping for a mild tang, maybe a rustic sharpness. What you get instead is a direct assault on your senses. It's sour, it's gritty, and it's unexpectedly warm. The flavor hits you in stages. First, insult, then offense, then pure betrayal. You wonder if cheese can go to war. You're fairly certain this one already has. You ask what kind of cheese it is. The response is just a shrug and the words goat adjacent. There is bread, but it is less like bread and more like a weapon. It's dense, chewy, and harder than emotional vulnerability. You test it against the table. The table loses a splinter. A child uses a chunk of it to hammer a nail into a board. You nibble on it cautiously and immediately understand why most people in this time period are missing teeth. You attempt to be grateful. You say, "This is hearty." They beam, proud and pleased. A man with a beard like a tangle of roots offers you a bowl of stew. It's steaming, which is promising. It also smells like desperation and mushrooms. You ask as politely as you possibly can, "Does this have meat in it?" There is a long pause, not the kind of pause where someone is thinking, but the kind of pause where someone is calculating how much they are legally obligated to disclose. The cook, who might also be the town's tanner, executioner, and midwife, judging by the variety of tools hanging from her belt, finally says, "Define meat." You do not press the issue. You take the bowl, you stir the stew. It is mostly liquid, partly chunk, and entirely mysterious. There's something floating in it that could be a turnip, or it could be a knuckle. You try a bite. It is chewy and confusing. There's a hint of something that used to be an animal or maybe just lived near one. The broth has a certain saltiness to it that makes you question the integrity of the nearby well. You just tell yourself it's protein. Something crunches unexpectedly. You put the bowl down and make vague noises of satisfaction. A small boy stares at you and says, "That used to be Henry." You do not ask any follow-up questions. The meal continues. More turnips appear. Pickled things arrive in jars that smell like a series of consequences. You're offered something called blood pudding, which looks like a dare and feels like a trap. You decline. The old woman from earlier mutters something and crosses herself. You sit back, your stomach twisting slightly, your mouth coated in a film of unanswered questions. The food doesn't just lack seasoning, it lacks forgiveness. Everything is either too bland, too sour, or vaguely sentient. You are full, but you are not nourished. You are fed, but you are not safe. Later, your stomach gurgles, not in hunger, in warning. The cheese has plans. You see the goat and you make the first mistake of the day, which is saying out loud, "Oh, look at the little guy." The second mistake is approaching it like you're in a petting zoo and not, as it turns out, on the sacred stomping grounds of Barnabas, destroyer of joy. You crouch down, smiling like a fool, and extend your hand in a gesture you think radiates trust and affection. The goat interprets this as a declaration of war. It doesn't charge you, that would be too predictable. It just saunters up as calm as a monk, its eyes locked on yours with the cold intelligence of a tax collector who smells blood in the water. You hold your breath, it sniffs your palm, you exhale, and then it headbutts your knee with the force of a battering ram being wielded by a creature that has been skipping leg day for precisely 0 days of its life. You crumple. The crowd, because of course there's a crowd, gasps in unison. A child drops a turnip. A crone leans forward like she's watching the final round of a tournament. You try to stand, but the goat is not finished with you. It circles you once, triumphant, and then begins to eat your sleeve with the nonchalance of someone enjoying a light snack during a casual public humiliation. You try to pull your arm away, but the fabric is already gone, swallowed into the void of its terrible hunger. You're left with a drool-dampened stump of wool and the haunting knowledge that you've just been partially consumed by a farm animal. You lock eyes with it again. It burps. The children cheer. Someone starts clapping. You sit down slowly, careful not to provoke any further violence. The goat follows you and then attempts to climb onto your back. You swat at it, not with any real force, but with the gentle, useless flapping of someone who has lost all sense of dominance. It hops off, insulted by your audacity, and trots away with a jaunty arrogance, its tail flicking like punctuation at the end of a very public sentence. You assess the damage. Your knee is throbbing, your sleeve is history, and your pride is scattered across the dirt like breadcrumbs for emotional scavengers. You can feel the eyes of the village on you, the subtle shift from suspicion to pure entertainment. You're not the outsider anymore, you're the village fool. You try to laugh it off, but the sound that comes out is the kind of wheeze usually reserved for ghosts who died mid-sneeze. A little girl walks past and pats your shoulder. "It likes you," she says solemnly, as if that's ever a good thing. You manage a nod, still sitting there in the mud, staring at your new enemy as it headbutts a fence post just for fun. A man approaches, chewing on something unidentifiable and hard. "Barnabas don't like folks who smell like books," he says. You want to ask how he knows that, you want to ask a lot of things, but instead you just say, "Of course," because that feels like the only appropriate response when livestock successfully asserts dominance over you. You limp back toward the hut you've been haunting all day. The goat follows you at a distance, not close enough to be affectionate, but just close enough to remind you who won. You glance over your shoulder, it's chewing on something. You don't want to know what it is. It might be your dignity. You decide to never pet anything ever again. You sneeze once, just once, and the entire square goes completely quiet. It's not a polite, curious quiet. It's not even the uneasy hush that follows an awkward toast. No, this is the kind of silence of people wondering if they're about to witness something historically significant and probably fatal. Birds stop chirping. A dog whimpers. Somewhere a chicken lays an egg out of pure tension. You sniff. A man wearing a robe that doubles as a tablecloth clutches a wooden cross and starts chanting something in Latin, or possibly a recipe. He lunges at you with holy water that smells like regret and pond scum. He sprinkles it on your face like you're a salad in need of seasoning, muttering faster and louder with every single drop. You try to explain that it's just seasonal allergies, but the word allergies has not yet been invented, and it sounds suspiciously close to allegiance, which is not ideal when the village is trying to decide if you're possessed or just deeply annoying. Then the garlic arrives. You don't know her name. You never will. But she is old, she is swift, and she is absolutely sure that you need garlic rubbed on your forehead immediately. Her hands are rough, her aim is true, and before you can even object, you smell like an appetizer. She nods solemnly and says, "To ward off the humours." You do not know what humours are in this context, but they are apparently very active somewhere near your face. A child points and whispers, "I saw them talk to the goat." Someone gasps. You attempt to clarify that you did in fact speak to the goat, but not in a spell-casting kind of way. It was more in a "please don't destroy me again" kind of way. This does not help your case. A woman clutching a basket of questionable eggs hisses and forms a sign with her fingers that might be a ward or might just be very rude. You back away slowly, but the crowd follows you. It is no longer a village, it is an audience, and you are today's matinee performance. Someone loudly wonders whether witches sneeze. A man counters that demons sneeze too. A third person suggests that maybe you're just sick, and is immediately shushed with the intensity of a nation actively repressing logic. You consider running, but you're still sore from the goat incident and mildly concussed from doing laundry. So you do what any self-respecting time traveler would do in your place. You smile, you hold up your hands, and you say, "Bless you." They shriek. A bell rings. You didn't see a bell before. You don't know who's ringing it or why, but it sounds exactly like doom. A hunched man holding a staff that's taller than you are hobbles toward the square. You assume he is some kind of local authority, possibly the village elder, possibly just the guy who really likes drama. Either way, he has one working eye, and it is aimed directly at your soul. He sniffs once, loudly, and declares they've been touched by air spirits. You don't know what that means, but the mood immediately shifts. A few people cross themselves. One man starts tying knots in a rope, either to hang you or to contain you. You're not clear on the details. Someone mentions leeches. Someone else starts preparing a fire. You cough just once. That was a mistake. They form a circle, a protective circle, they say, though no one is being protected from you, just from the air you apparently just infected with your demonic windpipes. You try to joke, "Guess I'm a breath of fresh air, huh?" But no one laughs. The priest throws more water. You taste algae and fear. Eventually, the goat arrives. Barnabas. He looks at you, he looks at the circle, and then he lies down peacefully at your feet. You are doomed. You sneeze again. The blacksmith hands you a hammer that looks like it was forged from the disappointment of giants. You grasp it with both hands, feeling confident, steady, a brave, modern soul ready to prove yourself among the soot-covered titans of industry. You lift. It moves approximately 2 inches before gravity reminds you that your arm muscles were mostly built for typing and carrying takeout. Something shifts in your spine with the subtle crackle of a haunted floorboard, and suddenly your posture resembles that of a shrimp in the middle of a crisis. You make a sound. It is not a strong sound. The blacksmith pauses mid-swing, watching you with the same expression one might reserve for a rat wearing a tiny crown. His mustache twitches, possibly with pity, though it's more likely with repressed amusement. "Soft," he mutters, not unkindly, more like he's diagnosing a piece of undercooked meat. You try to smile, but your lower back is staging a full-scale rebellion, and your upper lip is sweating with betrayal. Still, you insist on helping. You insist because you are stubborn and delusional, and you have something to prove to a man who hasn't blinked in 5 minutes. So, when he gestures toward the coal pile, you nod with misplaced heroism. You grab the nearest shovel and begin scooping, which is fine until you try to carry it across the room and realize that coal, unlike dignity, actually has weight, a lot of it. And also it spills everywhere, and then it spreads like guilt. In an effort to fix your mistake, you scoop the coal back up with a speed and enthusiasm that absolutely no one asked for. You move too fast, you misjudge your steps, you bump the bellows, you knock over a lantern. The lantern tips, the fire leaps. The blacksmith does not yell, he does not panic. He simply removes his apron, sighs deeply from somewhere beneath his ribcage, and points to the exit like a man who's seen this all before and does not need to see it again. You stomp on the flames with what's left of your dignity. The fire dies with a hiss, but the damage is done. The floor is scorched. The coals are scattered like the dreams of apprentices past. A wheel of iron that used to resemble a horseshoe is now something closer to a sad, metallic pretzel. The blacksmith surveys the wreckage, chewing the inside of his cheek like it's trying to escape. From outside, someone shouts, "Is it the forge again?" The blacksmith answers with a grunt that might mean yes, or might mean leave me to mourn. You are handed a bucket and told to go draw water, not because the fire is still burning, but because the blacksmith needs something to pour on his own sense of loss. As you leave, you hear laughter. Not cruel, just tired. The kind of laughter that comes from a man who has accepted that chaos, wears soft hands and city shoes. By the end of the hour, you are known by a new name. You are no longer the stranger. You are the incident. Children whisper it like a ghost story. The goat looks at you with renewed suspicion. You sit outside the forge, soot-covered and soul-damp, wondering how many centuries it takes to rebuild a reputation in a town where the highlight of the week was watching you nearly burn down the only source of metalwork for 50 miles. You consider trying again tomorrow, but your back says no. So does the blacksmith. Midday arrives without any ceremony. There are no lunch breaks here, no cozy cafes or thoughtfully curated cheese boards. There is only the sun glaring down like it's auditioning for the role of God, and your stomach making sounds that suggest an internal rebellion. You look around for any signs of nourishment and find none, just people gnawing on things that may or may not have once moved under their own power. One man is eating what looks like a boot. You can't be sure that it isn't. You ask if there's lunch. They look at you like you just asked where the elevator is. A woman hands you something wrapped in a leaf and calls it a pie. She says it with pride, the way someone might announce they've just caught a dragon with their bare hands. You accept it politely because you're starving and also vaguely afraid of her. It is not a pie, it is at best a warning. The crust is hard enough to qualify as medieval armor. The filling is grey and mysterious and smells faintly of onion, fear, and something that was pickled against its will. You take a bite because your body is crying out for calories, and this seems like the only available option that isn't dirt or your own tongue. It crunches in a way that no food ever should. Your molars scream. The taste is complex, by which you mean it has several layers of confusion. There's salt, there's bitterness, there's an herb you suspect is just grass, and something chewy that might be meat, but also might just be disappointment. You chew for what feels like an entire season. The woman watches you like a hawk who knows exactly what it just fed you. You nod politely and say, in a tone usually reserved for hostage videos. She beams, proud. You swallow? It does not go down quietly. Your stomach registers the intruder and begins negotiations that quickly break down. The sensation is immediate and intense. Your insides begin to reorganize themselves into a protest march. You sit down to process what you've just done, both emotionally and biologically. A nearby man offers you a sip of something in a wooden cup. You take it, thinking maybe it's water. It is not. It's ale. Or what ale would be if it were brewed in a boot and seasoned with pure regret. Your eyes water. Your throat contemplates resignation. The sun climbs higher, and people return to their various chores. Hauling, hoeing, hammering, and hurting. No one naps. No one relaxes. The concept of a break doesn't exist here unless something actually snaps, which it often does. You try to help by lifting a basket, but every movement feels like it just jiggles the pie deeper into your core. You're not sure how long you sit there, just listening to your organs reevaluate their contracts. You burp once and feel a vision coming on. There's a child playing with a stick shaped like a sword, and you wonder if this is how it all ends for you. Not with a battle, but with a badly labelled pastry and some warm, haunted beer. By evening, the sun starts to dip, but your nausea refuses to. You walk in small, deliberate circles, hoping the motion will help. It does not. A dog sniffs you and decides it's better off somewhere else. Even Barnabas, the goat who once claimed your sleeve in open combat, steers clear of you. Someone asks how you liked the pie. You smile weakly and say it was very filling. They nod, satisfied. Then they mention as an afterthought that it's best eaten before the meat turns. You blink. Then you ask very carefully when exactly the meat in your pie turned. They just laugh and say, "Well, the butcher's boy went missing 3 days ago, so we're back to last week's stores." You stare at them. You stare at your hands. You stare at the horizon, which offers no answers, only more sky and the distant promise of gastrointestinal vengeance. Midnight is coming, and it's bringing consequences. You spot someone roughly your age, which in this village could mean anywhere from 15 to 40, depending on their dental structure and level of visible trauma. They're leaning against a fence that's more theoretical than it is structural, idly whittling a stick into what might eventually become a slightly smaller stick. They have the sort of face that suggests they've already seen 3 wars, 2 hauntings, and 1 extremely suspicious turnip. You approach slowly, wearing what you hope is a friendly, non-threatening smile. It feels like the kind of moment that could blossom into camaraderie, or at least a passing nod of mutual survival. You say hello. Just that. Hello? 1 word, warm and inviting. They grunt. It is not a welcoming grunt. It is the kind of grunt that says, "I have buried people for less than this." They turn and walk away with no sense of urgency, just the steady, confident pace of someone who has already decided you're not worth the calories of continued existence. You stand there, your hands still slightly raised, your smile frozen in place like a wax figure of social failure. You try again later, this time with someone who's carrying firewood. She looks less threatening, possibly even kind. Her shawl doesn't seem to be cursed. You wave and offer your name. She just narrows her eyes as if she's trying to determine whether your existence is a test from God or just a prank from the forest. She does not ask your name in return. She asks instead, "Are you French?" The question lands with the weight of hidden history. You pause, your mouth opens, but nothing intelligent comes out. You are suddenly aware that there may not be a correct answer to this question. Saying yes could mean betrayal. Saying no could still mean betrayal. You don't know what year it is. You don't know which war is currently happening. All you know is that she's holding an axe and her tone suggests she has used it on more than just firewood. You say, "Not exactly." She raises an eyebrow. The air tenses. A nearby chicken senses the conflict and just wanders away. You quickly add that you come from a distant place, far off, with mountains. Yes, mountains and cows. You say it like it's a passport. You smile again, which feels incredibly risky. She squints at you like she's trying to see if your soul is wearing a disguise. "Sounds French," she says. You thank her for the conversation and retreat like a defeated diplomat. She just watches you go. You're not sure if you've passed the test or if you've just been filed away as possibly dangerous, mostly useless. By the time you reach the edge of the square, a small group of children has gathered to throw pebbles near your feet. Not at you, just near you, which is somehow worse. It's not aggression, it's judgment. They don't even laugh. One of them just mutters, "Witch adjacent," and runs off. You spend the next hour pretending to be deeply interested in woodpiles and oxen, hoping someone will mistake you for a normal, functioning peasant, but no one makes eye contact. A man walks past and whispers something that sounds like French goat whisperer, and now you're not sure which part of that is worse. You attempt one last social interaction before dusk, joining a group of people standing around a barrel. You ask what they're talking about. One of them turns, looks you up and down, and says, "Plague." You nod wisely. Ah. They just continue staring. You back away slowly. As the sun sets and the cold starts to set in, you find yourself sitting beside Barnabas the goat, who at least acknowledges your presence with a sniff. You speak softly to him, as one outcast to another. He does not headbutt you this time, which feels like growth. A nearby woman walks by, sees you muttering to the goat, and crosses herself with impressive speed. You are now known by many names. None of them are friend. They spot you before you spot them. A gaggle of medieval children, barefoot, slightly sticky, and possessed of the kind of raw, chaotic energy typically reserved for locusts and minor demons. They emerge from behind a crumbling wall, a whole pack of them, their faces streaked with something that may be dirt or war paint or both. One of them is gnawing on what looks like a twig. Another one has an eye patch, but you suspect it's purely for aesthetic reasons. You try to appear friendly. You give a little wave, which is apparently a signal for attack. The one in front, clearly the ringleader, raises a stick like a battle standard and screams something completely unintelligible. The others scream back, more for the fun of it than for strategy. And then the chase begins. You run, not quickly and not well, because your shoes were not built for this century or this kind of terrain. One of them slaps your leg with a reed. Another one hurls a clump of mud with perfect medieval accuracy. It hits you square in the cheek, earthy and wet and deeply personal. You pause, wiping your face, trying to establish some kind of adult authority. This is a mistake. They surround you. You hold up your hands and try to reason with them, asking what this is all about. One child asks if you're a bandit. Another asks if you're a ghost. A third one just grabs your sleeve and yells, "He has soft hands," as though that alone is proof of your treachery. You attempt to explain yourself, but mid-sentence, someone takes your shoe, just takes it. You don't even see who it was. It just vanishes like hope in a storm. You spin around looking for your footwear and your dignity, but all you see is laughter and small, darting feet. A girl no older than 7 points at you and asks if you're cursed or just naturally unlucky. It's not even mean the way she says it. It's academic. She genuinely wants to know what kind of disaster you are. You say you're not cursed. No one believes you. A boy snorts and says, "That's exactly what a cursed person would say." And now the whole group is murmuring in agreement. They begin to debate your origins like you're some local legend that just wandered out of a fairy tale and forgot how doors work. One suggests you were raised by wolves, but not the clever kind of wolves. Another one thinks you're a royal exile, banished for failing to ride a horse properly. You don't correct them, mostly because one of them is now braiding something into your hair, and you fear what might happen if you move. Eventually, the oldest among them, a pre-teen with the expression of a retired soldier, calls a ceasefire. She declares you unthreatening, possibly an omen, but not a dangerous one. More like a walking cautionary tale. The others nod solemnly and then disperse, off to find new prey, or mud, or wild berries, or presumably the next person to psychologically dismantle. You're left with one shoe, damp socks, and a new and profound understanding of power dynamics. Your hair smells faintly of moss. You walk back through the village with twigs in your collar and judgment in every eye that passes you. Someone asks what happened. You just say children, and they nod knowingly. You don't mean to step on the chicken, it just happens. One moment you're walking through the yard, minding your own modern-era business, and the next there's a squawk, a flurry of feathers, and the kind of accusatory glare that says lawsuits would be filed if this century had them. The chicken doesn't scream so much as it issues a formal statement, loudly and publicly. You back away with your hands up like the poultry police are on their way. The chicken continues to squawk long after you're gone. You can still hear it down the road. You are fairly certain it's telling the others, and the others are definitely listening. You attempt to make amends by helping to round up the pigs. This feels redemptive, even noble. You imagine yourself becoming a kind of rustic hero, the swine whisperer, a redeemed foot stomper turned local legend. That fantasy lasts for roughly 4 seconds, which is exactly how long it takes for the pig to look at you. Not just glance, but look at you deeply, with eyes that say you have already failed some kind of test you didn't even know you were taking. You lunge anyway. It does not run. It waits, lets you get close enough to believe you have a chance, and then it pivots with shocking elegance and waddles off in a direction that clearly implies mockery. You chase it again. It speeds up, almost gleefully. It's not escaping, it's performing, and you are its audience. The pig is now prancing through the mud like a dancer in a tragic opera. You trip on a root, the pig watches. Later, you sit near the barn trying to collect what's left of your dignity. A cat appears as if summoned by your despair. You reach out slowly, gently. You whisper a greeting like you've seen in movies, where animals magically trust people who are kind or lonely or vaguely chosen by destiny. The cat blinks once, completely expressionless, then turns around so you can get a good, clear view of its tail as it walks directly away and disappears into a haystack without a sound. That hurts more than the root did. You hear a rustling above you. You look up. The rooster is on the roof. You don't know how it got there. You don't know how long it's been watching. It crows loudly right as you attempt to stand up. The noise startles you. You fall back down. The rooster crows again, shorter this time, tighter. It feels pointed. That night, while everyone else is eating in quiet exhaustion, you catch a goat staring at you from the doorway, just standing there, watching. You blink. It doesn't. You think about calling someone over, but by the time you do, the goat is gone. You're not sure if it was even real. You wonder briefly if this is how madness begins. By dusk, you find yourself just walking the perimeter of the village, glancing at shadows. The animals don't follow you, not directly, but you feel watched. You pass a dog. It growls, not viciously, just enough to make a point. A cow moos at you in a tone that could mean anything from hello to you have offended the natural balance. The horse in the stable refuses to meet your eyes. It is all starting to feel coordinated. You consider apologizing to the air, to the barn, to whatever god of beasts now holds your fate in its hoofed, clawed, or feathered grasp. You whisper, "I'm sorry," and a sheep bleats at you like it's heard worse apologies, but not by much. You return to your straw mattress that smells like wet dreams deferred, and you lie very still. Somewhere outside, something rustles. You pull the blanket over your head and try not to think about the fact that the chicken you stepped on hasn't been seen since noon. You're beginning to think it's planning something. You were just trying to be polite. That's how it always starts. A smile, innocent, non-committal, possibly even charming, if the lighting is generous and no one's wearing glasses, which they aren't, because it's the 14th century and corrective lenses are a luxury reserved for monks and sorcerers. You smile at a woman who hands you a ladle. She smiles back. It's a wholesome moment. Unfortunately, she's married. Even more unfortunately, she's married to the man who is currently sharpening a knife with the kind of focus that suggests unresolved emotional tension and a deep loyalty to outdated codes of honor. You don't know he's her husband. You don't know that this village treats eye contact like a marriage proposal and smiling like a binding legal agreement. All you know is that suddenly it's very quiet. Someone drops a wooden spoon. Somewhere behind you, a sheep bleats in alarm. The woman is gone. The husband is not. You back away slowly, your hands raised, like you're surrendering to a deeply medieval form of justice, which, as it turns out, you are. You try to change the subject. You gesture to the altar in the corner of the hall and say something about how lovely it is, hoping to shift the attention to the aesthetics of spiritual decor. And this is how you touch it, the sacred object. The one you're not supposed to touch, or breathe on, or even look directly at unless you've fasted for 3 days and been blessed by someone with at least 3 visible bones hanging from their belt. You touch it like it's a centerpiece at a rustic wedding. You tap it. A woman gasps. A child begins to cry. You try to sit down and make yourself small, hoping that if you fold enough of yourself inward, you can become invisible or at least ignorable. You choose a bench. The bench, as it turns out, is the one reserved for someone called Brother Aldrich, who by all accounts has not spoken in 10 years, but will absolutely throw a person into a moat for touching his seat. You shift to the left. Too late, a wrinkled hand clamps down on your shoulder. You look up into the eyes of someone who once strangled a wolf and hasn't stopped shaking since. At this point, the room is buzzing. Not with conversation. No, these are murmurs, sacred and grim. The sort of sound that's made when a prophecy is being fulfilled in real time and no one is excited about it. The priest arrives. He is sweating, not dramatically but deliberately, like he's trying to expel your sins through sheer proximity. He touches his beads. He does not touch you. You're asked to explain yourself. You begin to say that you're from out of town, which is both true and the worst possible answer. The term outsider is whispered like a curse. Someone spits. Someone else crosses themselves 3 times and knocks over a pew. The phrase trial by soup is mentioned. You laugh because it sounds like a joke. It is not a joke. Trial by soup, as you learn very quickly, involves a pot, a stone, and the ability to retrieve said stone without dying of burns or spiritual disgrace. It is unclear if anyone has ever survived. It is even less clear if the soup is edible. It smells like justice and root vegetables. You apologize so thoroughly, so desperately that your modern dignity dissolves into a slurry of bowing hand gestures and an offer to milk something, anything, just to make this all stop. Eventually, an elder with a beard like a mop and the authority of a hungover wizard declares you a fool, but not a wicked one. This is apparently the best-case scenario. The pot is removed. The priest still looks uneasy. The woman's husband is still sharpening his knife, but now with a little less focus. You are told to eat outside. You do. Alone, quietly, surrounded by chickens. You don't smile at anyone for the rest of the day. You are told it's time for church, which sounds benign enough. You imagine a small chapel, some candles, maybe a choir, humming gently in the background while old men nod solemnly at the walls. What you get is 3 miles of muddy walking, a swarm of midges that seem particularly interested in your ears, and the hollow-eyed march of people who look like they've already confessed everything worth confessing, and now just show up out of a sense of obligation and fear. The church looms ahead like a punishment. Its stone walls tilt slightly like they're tired of holding it all together. The bell doesn't really ring so much as it wheezes, and the doorway is only wide enough for one unfortunate soul at a time. Inside it smells like wet wood, damp wool, and centuries of whispered sins. You shuffle in behind a man with a back like a question mark, and you try to look reverent. You do not succeed. The benches are not made for human bodies. They're made for testing the resilience of tailbones and the human spirit. You sit on one that looks the least threatening. It creaks ominously. A woman in a veil hisses at you. Apparently, you've chosen the place of someone important, possibly a noble, or maybe just someone who's extremely superstitious and also armed. You apologize in a whisper. She does not acknowledge it. She just stares forward as though this is your trial, and she's here to watch justice unfold. The priest arrives. He is shaped like a broom and is twice as judgmental. His robe is too long, his beard is too thin, his voice, however, is booming. It bounces off the stone walls like it's trying to escape. He begins the sermon in Latin, then switches abruptly to a dialect you're not sure is English or just aggressive muttering. Either way, you don't understand a single word. It goes on and on and on. You try to stay awake, you really do. You blink rapidly, you pinch your own arm. You breathe deeply through your mouth in a way that makes the woman beside you flinch, like you've just summoned the plague. But your body has had enough. Your knees ache. Your stomach is a hollow drum of disappointment. And your brain, your sweet, exhausted brain, just quietly shuts the door on consciousness. You fall asleep. You do not do it gracefully. There is no gentle nodding or polite slumping. You just collapse like a bag of laundry, your head tipping back, your mouth opening slightly, and a small but distinct snore escapes from somewhere deep within your ancestral shame. It echoes. The priest stops speaking. You remain asleep, floating in a dream where you are warm and fed, and far away from this building of heavy glances and invisible rules. Then someone kicks your shin. You jolt awake, confused, your body insisting it's still Tuesday, and your mind trying to remember how to spell penance. The priest is staring at you. So is everyone else. He doesn't say your name. He doesn't know it. But he points at you with a finger like an accusatory icicle and mutters something about the signs. The crowd nods slowly. The woman next to you crosses herself and shifts a fraction of an inch farther away. A child whispers the word hexed. No one is exactly sure what it means, but it's agreed upon unanimously that it's not ideal. The sermon resumes, but it's no longer about humility or harvests. It's about vigilance, about false sleepers, about listening for the whispers of the enemy and the snores of the inattentive. You keep your eyes open the entire time, wide and unblinking, unsure if blinking now counts as disrespect or a gateway to further possession. When it's finally over, you try to leave quickly. Crowd parts for you slightly. You feel like a strange dog walking through a flock of suspicious geese. Someone pats you on the shoulder in a way that might be comforting or might be an attempt at spiritual quarantine. You vow never to sit again. The idea strikes you in a flash of desperate genius, somewhere between your 4th spoonful of boiled sadness and the moment a child pelts you with a surprisingly well-aimed turnip. You realize you will leave. You will escape. You will forge a new path in the wide medieval world beyond this village of questionable hygiene and emotional livestock. You tell no one, not because you're being stealthy, but because no one really listens to you anyway. You pack a sack. It contains a hunk of bread that could double as masonry, a questionable apple, and a wooden spoon you stole from the communal pile like a thief with very poor ambitions. You wrap yourself in a cloak that smells like wet hay and unfulfilled dreams. You step out into the early dusk, filled with purpose, dread, and the creeping suspicion that you are going to do this very, very wrong. The road greets you with the enthusiasm of a boot to the face. It's not a road exactly, it's more of a suggestion, a ribbon of mud winding through trees that all look like they witnessed a murder and never fully recovered. Your boots, which were never truly boots to begin with, absorb water at a spiritual level. Each step is a squelch of diminishing hope. The sky just spits on you. It's not quite rain, not quite mist. It's like the atmosphere itself is just sweating in your direction. You walk. You think of freedom. You think of London, or at least somewhere with a tavern and fewer geese. You imagine telling stories of your great escape to odd villagers, perhaps while wearing a hat of power. You try to whistle. It comes out as a wheeze. Something howls in the woods, and it's not a poetic howl. It sounds hungry and extremely annoyed. That's when you meet Gregor. You do not mean to. You are trying to avoid eye contact with a tree that looks vaguely judgy when he just lurches out from behind it. Gregor is a man, allegedly. He has hair like a dishevelled mop, a beard that is home to several small bugs and possibly a bird, and eyes that have either seen too much or perhaps not nearly enough. He points at you, then he points at the tree. Then he begins screaming at the tree about taxes. You freeze. You consider just going around him. Gregor follows. You try to offer him your apple. He throws a mushroom at your chest and calls you a sky witch. You're not sure what that is, but it doesn't sound like something the villagers back home would approve of. Gregor continues yelling. You run. The road, such as it is, becomes a pit. You don't fall in exactly, you sort of descend into it slowly with the grace of a reluctant potato. Mud sucks at your legs like it's been lonely. Your bread brick is lost forever in the mire. Your spoon breaks in half. You hear another howl, closer this time. You decide with a clarity that is reserved only for the doomed that you are not wilderness material. You crawl out. You limp back. When the village finally comes back into view, it feels less like a prison and more like a slightly cleaner corner of purgatory. No one even notices your return. One person just hands you a turnip like it's a peace offering. A goat glares at you like it remembers what you did. It probably does. You find your hay pile. It smells worse now. You lie down and you stare at the rafters, which might fall on you at any moment out of sheer pity. You tried to escape. You failed. This is your life now. Bad porridge, goat-based trauma, and the occasional trial by soup. You are not strong. You are not clever. You are just here. And you're pretty sure Gregor still thinks you're in charge of taxes. There is a town meeting. You are not invited. You are simply told later by a woman with 3 teeth and a suspiciously joyful tone that they've found something for you to do. This sounds promising for approximately 2 seconds until she adds, "You'll be the dung man now." You wait for the laughter, for someone to jump out and say, "It's all just a joke," but all you get is a pat on the back and a shovel that has seen things. Terrible brown things. The villagers smile at you with the collective satisfaction of people who have just offloaded a tremendous burden. It is the smile of a child passing a screaming baby to someone else and then running away. It is the smile of a tax collector who has just found a new victim. It is not a good smile. Your job is simple, they say. Walk the path. Gather what the animals leave behind. Horses, cows, sheep, goats, and anything else that has the audacity to exist, and also excrete. Transport it out of the streets and into the communal pile, which is located far too close to the well for comfort. You are given no gloves, you are given no boots, you are given what is generously called a tunic and realistically called a rag with ambition. The first pile just mocks you. It sits there, smug and steaming. You approach it like a man confronting his own destiny and not liking the look of it one bit. You scoop, you gag, you try to breathe through your mouth, which turns out to be so much worse. Your eyes water. Your soul whispers a quiet, angry, "Why?" You are told to sing as you work, to let people know you're coming. So they don't step in it, they say, as though the entire village has not already been tramping through waste with the enthusiasm of a parade. You try humming. It sounds mournful. A child joins in with a little drum made of bones. You are unsure whether to be touched or deeply unnerved. By midday, you smell like a battlefield that no one won. You are slipping more than you are walking, the mud and worse, forming an alliance against your dignity. At one point, you step too confidently on what you think is dry ground. It is not. It is betrayal. You fall, slow motion and tragic, landing with a squelch that echoes clear across the square. A silence follows, then laughter. Loud, communal, cathartic laughter. Even the goat laughs. You didn't know goats could laugh, but this one does. And it changes you. They start calling you Stinky Tom. You try to correct them. Your name isn't Tom. They just nod, smile, and then say it louder. "Oi, Stinky Tom's back!" one of them shouts as you drag your shame through the gate. A woman offers you a turnip like it's some kind of prize. The blacksmith just smirks and says, "You found your calling." You briefly consider launching the turnip at his head, but you lack the energy and the self-worth. You sit by the fire that night completely alone, because no one will sit next to you, not even the village dog who once ate a boot and survived. Your tunic is unsalvageable. Your hair has absorbed the scent of your labor. Your hands are stained with the truth of this place. You have become one with the muck, and yet, in a cruel twist of acceptance, you realize you might finally be fitting in. Not as a hero, not as a friend, but as a smell, as a legend, as a warning. You are Stinky Tom now, and Stinky Tom has work in the morning. You see her at the well. She's fetching water like it's a ballet, graceful and efficient, not a single drop spilled. Her scarf is the color of faded marigolds, and her sleeves are rolled up in that casually heroic way that suggests she knows how to skin a rabbit and also win a fist fight. You, for reasons that are unknown even to yourself, decide that this is the moment to flirt. You approach with all the confidence of a damp towel. You clear your throat. She glances at you like she's trying to determine whether you're an actual person or just another hallucination sent by the turnip wine. You say something about her eyes. You think it's charming, maybe a little poetic, possibly not even entirely coherent. It comes out sounding like a compliment, if compliments were invented by someone who had never actually met a human being before. There is a silence. Her grandmother materializes from behind a cart like a vengeful forest spirit. She does not speak. She just hisses, long and low, like a kettle that's about to blow or a snake who's seen some things. Her eyes say, "Leave," and her posture says, "Or be turned into soup." You take a respectful half-step back. Her mother is less subtle. She emerges from a nearby doorway with the precision of a military ambush and throws a sandal directly at your head. It connects. You are stunned by the force and by the realization that medieval footwear, while poorly designed for comfort, is spectacularly effective as a missile. You try to speak, but she's already shouting something about tainted moon blood and village shame. and you're not sure if that's about you or if it's just a general family motto. The girl, your original target, your muse, your fleeting dream of medieval companionship, laughs. It's not a flirty giggle, not a shy chuckle. It's a full-bodied, wheezing, knee-slapping laugh, like you've just done a pratfall into a pile of pig slop. It goes on for a while. At one point, she has to lean on the well for support. You feel something deep inside you just wilt. You decide to leave, not with a bow, not with a flourish, but with the hunched, rapid shuffle of someone trying to exit a bad idea while preserving what little remains of their soul. You step directly into a puddle on the way out. It's deep, it's cold. It soaks into your sock and fills your shoe with immediate swampy despair. You don't move. You just stand there in the puddle, marinating in your shame and increasingly questionable water. Someone walks by and just nods at you like this is the most reasonable thing they've seen all week. You hear a goat in the distance judging you. A child passes and whispers, "Stinky Tom tried to love." You wish that weren't your legacy, but there it is, spreading like fire through dry gossip. Later, at the communal dinner, no one sits beside you. Not because you smell, though you still do, but because you are now the official village tragedy. You're the reason a new rule is invented about flirting protocol, a rule that is literally carved into a wooden plaque and then nailed to the side of the well. You eat your gruel slowly. It tastes like defeat and someone else's oat-based sadness. Across the square, the girl waves. It is unclear if she means it kindly or ironically. You wave back anyway because you're nothing if not a romantic, a soggy, sandal-battered romantic. You are ushered into the feast hall, or what qualifies as one here, which is really more of a large barn with aspirations. The ceiling drips slightly. The benches all tilt in a way that suggests a long-term betrayal. A dog is already under the table, eyeing you with the weary suspicion of someone who has seen newcomers weep into their soup before. There's an excitement in the air which concerns you immediately. A dinner celebration in this village usually precedes either illness or a trial, or both. The table is set with the full medieval spectrum, bowls that smell faintly of moss, spoons that have been whittled into aggressive shapes, and cups that still have something mysterious crusted to the rim. You sit. Your legs go numb almost instantly because the bench is aggressively unpadded and actively hostile. A man with 3 fingers and no teeth offers you a grin and a slab of something he calls meat. You hesitate. It wobbles. You're not sure that meat is supposed to do that. You press your fork, well, a stick, with prongs into it, and it shudders like it remembers having a life. The surface is grey, the inside is greyer. You ask what kind of animal it is. The man says it's not. Then he laughs and slaps your back, which somehow makes it all worse. Next is the bread. It is circular and dense enough to affect local gravity. Someone cuts a slice with a hatchet. It takes them 2 tries. The crust could probably deflect arrows. You bite down. A tooth sings its death song. Across the table, a woman uses her piece of bread to hammer a nail into the wall successfully. Then there's the stew. There's always the stew. It arrives with a smell that is best described as historical. You fish out a chunk and you just stare at it for a full minute, hoping it will identify itself. It does not. You chew. It resists. It might be a root vegetable, it might be cloth. Either way, it has a vengeance in its texture. The ale is brought out in a wooden jug that leaks slightly from the bottom. You pour some into your cup. It foams in a very concerning way. You take a sip. It tastes like something that was once beer, then changed careers mid-life and became a solvent. Your lips sting, your tongue retreats. Your stomach begins composing its final words. You try to pace yourself. You pretend to chew. You smile when others do. You laugh when someone tells a joke you don't understand because it's in some dialect and is possibly also a curse. You nod when an old man points at your bowl and says something about digestive preparation. You don't ask what that means, you fear the answer. Suddenly a toast is declared, everyone raises their cups and shouts something that sounds celebratory, but could just as easily be a warning. You drink. A mistake. The warmth of the ale settles in your stomach like a boulder that's been dipped in vinegar. You can feel your organs blinking slowly, like they're considering unionizing. Dessert arrives. It's a turnip. That's it. Just a raw, small turnip. You accept it solemnly. You do not bite it. You name it Harold, and you keep it in your pocket. Harold has done nothing to you. As the evening drags on, the candles sputter, and the dog under the table begins licking your leg with a grim determination. A bard starts playing something that is stringed and out of tune, and you just stare down at your bowl, which now has a film forming on the surface. It moves when you breathe. You begin to understand why no one here lives past 30. You also begin to understand why everyone talks to their goats. There is something about this meal, about the ambient dampness, the mysterious meat, the slow realization that you have somehow consumed something that had hooves, that makes you feel like you are slowly being exorcised by dinner itself. You don't remember leaving. You just wake up later, flat on your back in the hay, with Harold cradled gently in your hand. Your stomach makes a sound like an approaching storm. Something distant howls. It might be you, and dinner isn't even over yet. The sun dies slowly over the village, like it's doing you a personal favor, bleeding pink across the sky as the cold starts to slide in. You think perhaps the day is finally over. That maybe, just maybe, you can collapse somewhere and pretend this entire time period just didn't happen. But this is the Middle Ages. Night isn't for rest. It's just a second shift. There is no bath. You ask where one might rinse off. A woman points at a bucket and says, "Share with the chickens." You laugh. She doesn't. The water inside smells like betrayal. It's grey. It has things floating in it. And it's cold enough to make your skeleton consider relocating. You splash a little on your face and immediately long for the sting of modern soap and the simple comfort of high water pressure. You make your peace with filth. You stumble into what they claim are the sleeping quarters. It's not. It's a wooden coffin of a room with hay for a floor and a vague sense of dread in the air. There's a pile of cloth in the corner that might be a blanket or it might be a very flat horse. You lie down, something moves. You lie on the other side. Something squeaks. You stop lying down and you simply hover in a state of emotional paralysis. The fleas introduce themselves very quickly. They are assertive, they are confident, they have goals and families and a thriving nightlife that takes place entirely on your ankles. You scratch. It doesn't help. You scratch more. You consider tearing your entire skin off and just living as a well-meaning skeleton. You think about modern mattresses, about foam layers and adjustable firmness, about lavender-scented memory pads, and you nearly weep. Mice scurry past your head like they're late for important appointments. One of them stops to stare at you. You think you can see pity in its eyes, then it keeps running, and you hear it join a very heated argument between two rats under the floorboards. Something crashes. Something else squeals. This is apparently normal. Someone is whispering to the moon just outside your door. You don't know if it's a prayer, or poetry, or a warning. The cadence is soothing until it suddenly isn't, and then it becomes deeply personal and aggressively aimed at the moon's betrayal in a matter that involved stolen turnips. You pretend you didn't hear it. The moon does not reply. In the next room, a man begins sobbing loudly, repeatedly. He's chanting something about soup. You catch the words too thin and betrayed by carrots. And then it just devolves into a guttural wailing. No one checks on him. This too is apparently normal. You try to sleep. You truly try. You close your eyes and you count sheep. Only the sheep here are thin and hostile and prone to biting. You breathe deeply, but the air is thick with the scent of mildew and onions and low expectations. Your body aches from doing nothing well all day. Your soul aches for central heating. Your thoughts spiral. You remember microwaves and how they hum like a lullaby. You remember the warm glow of a refrigerator light at midnight. You remember blankets that didn't smell like anxiety and weren't crawling with bugs that probably had names. You remember sinks. You cry a little. The crying man is now singing to his soup. You roll onto your side and a stick pokes you directly in the kidney. A flea bites your ear in solidarity. You consider escape again. You consider yelling. You consider time travel. You consider fire. Instead, you just lie perfectly still, staring at the roof as a spider descends with the slow confidence of someone who knows you won't stop it. The moon disappears behind a cloud. The mice cheer. You are not asleep, but you are no longer truly awake either. You exist now in that crack between suffering and resignation. The Middle Ages hum their lullaby of discomfort. You close your eyes and you dream, not of flying or freedom or romance. You dream of indoor plumbing. The final straw is not, as you might have expected, the rats or the soup man or even the goat that keeps showing up like a debt collector. No, it's the moment your last piece of bread just crumbles in your hand before it can even reach your mouth, disintegrating just like your hope. You watch it fall to the dirt floor, mixing with straw and despair and something that might be fermented turnip. You just stare at the remains and something deep inside you quietly shuts off like a candle getting snuffed out by the wind. You don't scream, you don't fight, you don't curse the sky or challenge the moon to a duel. You simply walk over to the hearth, lower yourself down with the grace of a fallen wardrobe, and fold into the fetal position like a sad croissant. There is no fire in the hearth. There is only ash. Somehow this feels appropriate. You start to mutter, not prayers, not apologies, but phrases from a world that no longer exists. "Can I speak to your manager?" you whisper. The Wi-Fi is down. This meeting could have been an email. Each phrase hits the air like a forgotten relic, and the villagers don't understand the words, but they understand the tone. You've surrendered completely. A child wanders past and tosses a potato at your foot in what might be an offering or maybe a dare. A man pokes your shoulder with a stick, waits for a moment, then nods in solemn approval. An old woman places a wool blanket over your twitching form and whispers, "Let it be." You don't know if it's meant kindly or if she's just warning the others to leave you alone before you explode like an emotional pomegranate. No one asks you to work. No one tries to involve you in laundry or pig herding or any rituals involving herbs and accidental fire. The blacksmith walks by and does not mock your weak arms. The priest does not throw water on you. Even the goat maintains a respectful distance, chewing ominously but without any direct eye contact. You've become a fixture now, like the warped door frame or the permanent smell of cabbage. Just part of the scenery. The strange figure who came from nowhere, flailed dramatically for a full day, and then just collapsed like a haunted marionette. They call you the soft one. Not unkindly, just accurately. Someone drapes a turnip necklace over your neck. It smells like moist soil and a strange kind of community acceptance. You let it stay. You're not asleep, but you're not fully awake either. It's more of a passive existence, a quiet buffering screen for the soul. Occasionally, you hum the jingle of a 90s fast food commercial to yourself for comfort. No one minds. The soup man sings along. At one point, a chicken comes and sits on your back. You allow it. This is your life now. The sun starts to rise again, staining the sky with orange and mockery, and you realize you've survived. Technically, you are still alive. Mentally, unclear. Dignity, absolutely not. But breathing still counts for something. The villagers seem pleased, not impressed, but satisfied, like they've just watched someone complete a very messy rite of passage that involved more mud and public weeping than usual. You've earned a sort of twisted respect, not because you adapted, but because you broke in a way that finally made sense to them. You are now one of them, spiritually if not hygienically. You close your eyes as the goat snorts near your ear. You hear someone offer you more porridge. You do not answer. You've made it through 24 hours in the Middle Ages. Barely, but barely still counts.